Hello everyone, and welcome back to my Python course. Today we'll get started with lesson 1. We'll be going over value types and variables. And today's portion of the lesson will be the lecture. Okay, so let's get started. First thing we'll be doing today is running our first script. Now, if you've gone through lesson 0 already, technically this wouldn't be the first one. Speaking of, this lesson and all subsequent lessons are cumulative. So for lesson 1, I'm going to assume you've gone through all of lesson 0. For lesson 2, I'm going to assume you've gone through all of lesson 0 and 1. This is very important because, like I said before, everything is going to be cumulative, so don't skip any lessons. And for the most part, I'll only be showing everything from the Windows perspective. Now for the Mac OS, again, if you've gone through lesson 0, everything should be set up basically exactly the same way. So there's basically no real difference. Now, sometimes I might show the Mac perspective on some special cases. But of course, when those cases come up, I'll be telling you guys. So the first thing we're going to be doing is opening up your terminal in the text editor, Atom. Okay, and when you first open up Atom, you'll probably see something similar to this. If you look to the left side, you'll see a button that says Add Folders. Click on this in order to navigate to the folder that you want to work out of. Okay, great. So I just selected a folder called Test, and it's under my D drive. And from here, I just close the tabs, the welcome tabs and the new page tab and all that stuff. So it's very clean. You just have your project menu on the left side, and then this is your work area. So from here, all we need to do is right click the folder and select new file. I'm just going to name it, for example, I don't know, just test. I know, so creative. Test dot. Now make sure you enter .py, which designates this as a Python script. So just hit enter, and here we go. Now we have line 1. And what's great about Atom is that you'll see it'll become more and more useful later on, is that it automatically has syntax coloring, and also it does this automatic indentation that's 4 spaces, I believe. But anyway, we can go over that later on, but trust me, it's very useful. So let's go ahead and write our first script. How about the generic thing that everyone writes, right, when it comes to programming is always print, like hello world, right? That's kind of the rite of passage for programming, which, okay, fine, that's cool. But let's change it up a little bit. Start from the beginning. Okay, so print is a function. We'll talk about functions later, but basically print allows us to output directly onto our terminal to see the specific, in this case, a string to be output onto the terminal. Again, things will make sense in a little, later on. So print is the function. We're going to just type print and then parentheses. You can see the print, it changed colors to indicate it's a function. And we're just going to put in quotations. You can do double quotes or you can do single quotes. I like single quotes, and you can just type anything you want in here. I don't know, like, hey everyone, I'm back. Whoops, I forgot I shouldn't do another quotation. How about I am back? Okay, so here, I'll do an exclamation point as well. All right. So this is a very simple line, just one line. But this is a script if we run this. And so in order to run this, all we need to do is go to our terminal. And then from our terminal, we're going to navigate to our folder. Remember, lesson 0, all the navigation tools, the command prompt commands. So we're going to just go to change directly to test. And just, let's see, since this is Windows, okay, I have one thing in here, which is the Python script we just created, and we're going to go ahead and run it by just typing out test.py, or we can just do tab completion if you want to make it faster. Hit enter, and there we go. We have our output, and it just says, hey everyone, I am back. Now, of course, you can package this program onto the App Store and make $1 million, right? Well, no, of course not. You cannot do that because this script, while this is a functional script, is not very useful, and I highly doubt anyone will pay money for this. But the principle is there, right? If you have a great idea for a script, for some type of coding that people will find useful, yeah, sure, you can package it into a nicely presentable project, and then you can create your own app. You can upload it to the Apple Store or Android Store, and you can make money that way. Congratulations, you have now written your first script and you ran it on your terminal. So I mentioned before that print is a function, and we'll talk about functions later. But the other thing I mentioned was that the thing we put in the quotations is a string. Now, what are strings? Well, this basically lends itself to the three value types we work with, and they are strings, and you'll see it commonly abbreviated as str, and they are basically anything written using quotations. Okay, for example, let's say we have a short nucleotide sequence, okay, and we have these quotations around it. This means that this is a string object. Don't worry about what object means right now, but just know that this is a type, a value type. So this will be a string. This number will also be a string because it's in quotations. So with hello, and then this number with like a decimal point and some letters, also between quotations. So it is also a string. The next type that we encounter pretty often are integers, and you'll see them commonly abbreviated as int or int, and these are basically whole numbers. Okay, for example, 4655, 10, 73,134, etc. And lastly, the type we have are called floating point values, or they're just called floats. And all this means is that they're decimal values, okay, like 7.0, 3.14, all this other stuff here. And as well, at least for my line of work, the most common thing that I have to deal with are strings. Now, depending on the work you do, you might be doing integers and strings, and maybe also decimal values. But again, this depends on the work that you do. So the important part of all of this is that, as you can see, for integer values and the floats, we do not use any type of quotation marks. So which means that these are not string values. Okay, as you can see, once I put a number in quotes, whether single quotes or double quotes, then this becomes a string type. All right, these are strings. All right, these are ints, and these are floats. Values are great, but do you know what's better? Containers or variables. Normally, we don't straight up manipulate strings or integers as themselves. What I mean is that we use them once we've placed them into a container or a variable. So we call this variable assignment, okay, or these variable assignment statements. Here I've written in Atom, so here's the first line in Atom, and this is this is very useful. So if you want to write comments in your scripts in Atom, you can just use this pound sign in front of it, and when you run the script, Python won't interpret this. The interpreter will not interpret this. So it's really useful to kind of write notes to yourself and to other people. So for example, for this, I just did pound and then assignment statements. Okay. And you can see it changes the words, the letters to this kind of faded, italicized format. Okay, so line 2, this is what we call a variable. Okay, now before I go any further, I need to emphasize this point, and it's true for all types of expressions or statements, and especially important to realize when we're doing variable assignments. And that is, all of these assignment statements are evaluated from right to left. Okay? It's a little bit counterintuitive to the human mind because we process things from left to right. But when it comes to programming and when we're doing these assignment statements, it's always processed from the logic is going from right to left. So what we're doing is that we're putting whatever is after this equal sign, okay, and into it's processing whatever's to the right of this equal sign, and then it goes to the left. Now this equal sign, okay, you can see it's purple. This is not equivalency, okay? So this single equal sign does not equal to equivalency, okay? It just doesn't. Now we will get to equivalency later on, but this means assignment, okay? This means assignment. And so when you do this, the interpreter is going to look at this equal sign and then it's going to like, oh, okay, so this is an assignment statement. What are we assigning to what variable? And here to the right, you can see this is a string, right? Because you have these quotations and it's green. Again, syntax coloring, very useful. And it's going to look at the string and then it's going to basically assign or place into this variable, okay, that I've named sentence. And here we have another assignment statement, and we're putting the integer 777 into this variable called lucky number. And finally, we have another assignment statement, and we're putting this 3.14 float value. Okay, we're evaluating this from right to left, and we're putting it into this variable called pi day. And if you want to see what's in these containers or variables, all you need to do is, again, just use the print function I showed you guys earlier. So if you do print sentence, okay, you can see we're not printing the string directly this time. We're printing the variable or the container that has the string information. And then we can do print lucky number and print pi day, right? If you write this in Atom and then if you run this script, okay, so again, this is the same thing from the last page. And then if you run the script on your terminal, you'll see hello again, nice to meet you, 777, and 3.14 printed out on your terminal. The last thing I want to touch upon are kind of the general rules or guidelines and the warnings when we use when we're working with variables. So first of all, you cannot name your variables starting with a number value, and avoid certain special symbols such as this percentage symbol, which is actually it's an operator called a modulator operator, and we'll talk about this later. You also cannot have spaces or these gaps, right, between like if you're naming a variable. If you want to have kind of like two words, just go ahead and use a underscore. So, whoops, sorry. So you can use the underscore. So use underscore for multiple words if you want to have multiple words as your variable. And there's also certain keywords that's reserved for Python. For example, the capital TRUE is it's a Boolean value, and again we'll get to that later. So this cannot be a variable, but you could use lowercase TRUE, but this gets confusing. So I would just avoid keywords altogether. And there's, if you can just go ahead and Google what are the keywords of Python, then you can see kind of a list of, and I would avoid using anything on that list or any type of variations. And so if you try to use any of these inappropriate names as variables, you'll get the dreaded syntax error, invalid syntax, basically telling you, hey, you can't use this as a variable name. All right, so you messed up somewhere. And the other thing to be aware of, or just remember, is just be reasonable when you're naming your variables. Okay, so you could, for example, name a variable like this, and you just want to put the integer 542 into it. Okay, this is okay. It doesn't break any rules, but come on, this is really obnoxious, and there's no meaning behind this. The other thing is that if you have a bunch of values and you're working with this bunch of different values, and they're all very similar, please refrain from naming them with, again, similar names. Like, for example, if I have a DNA sequence, like a bunch of different DNA sequences, it would be very bad if I named one like lowercase d and then uppercase na, then like DNA, or then all lowercase and like one with an underscore. This is just really confusing. It'll confuse you, it'll confuse other people if you give them your script. So please avoid doing this and try to make your variables descriptive and unique in a way that makes sense to you and is easy to follow. Sometimes when you're working with a bunch of different variables, naming them and keeping them organized really is an art form. And finally, this is kind of funny at the end here. So try to avoid using variables that really doesn't make sense with the thing that you're putting in. So here I have a short nucleotide sequence. Sure, I can name this variable lettuce, right? I can put this nucleotide sequence into this variable called lettuce. But again, there's no meaning really behind this, right? You can do it, but it's just a bit silly. And so this actually brings up another point. Variables by themselves have no meaning. What I mean by this is that I could have named a variable called DNA, right? And I could have put this into DNA instead, this variable. But that doesn't mean it gives any meaning behind this variable DNA, if that makes any sense. What I mean is that I could have put this into something called lettuce or DNA, and in either case, it would have contained this specific nucleotide sequence. So when you see a variable name, like, don't just automatically assume, okay, this is a DNA sequence, or this is something else. You have to look at what is actually being put into or being assigned into said variable. And we've reached the end of our lecture for today. And next time we're gonna go into further depth about variables by giving you guys a bunch of examples and what I like to call logic tests, basically kind of testing your understanding. On my journey of learning Python, again, I'm self-taught, I realized that having lots of examples and working on those examples yourselves and doing homework and all these things, they will really, those are the key things in which you will begin to understand and kind of connect the dots, and things will start clicking in your mind. You have to do the examples. You have to work on homework. You have to understand the examples. You have to kind of test yourself. That's the only way to really have this stuff sink in, especially as a beginner. So next time, we'll be just going over a bunch of examples. I'll give you guys logic tests, and after that, I'll probably be assigning you guys specific homework exercises for you to work on. In the meantime, you can take the information we've talked about today. You can try doing different assignment statements, putting different values into variables, see what works, see what doesn't work, see what happens if you try something that's invalid, and see the error message on your terminal, stuff like that. Okay, great. Until next time then. I'll see you guys later. Take care.